Vas-y, take it away.
Hello, lovely people. We're going to start. So, first of all, welcome to all of you to Langfest. I know some of you have been took part today to the activities, to the conference. Some are new faces. I'm really happy. So, welcome to everyone. We are very, very, very happy tonight to have two genuinely interesting guests. So, David Peterson and Marc Okrand. So, David Peterson is a language creator and author. He created languages for many TV shows, films, including HBO's Game of Thrones, as I think you should know if you're here, the 100 and many others. He's also the author of Living Language Dothraki and The Art of Language Invention. He has a Bachelor in English and Linguistics from University of California, Berkeley, and a Master's in Linguistics from UC San Diego. And our other dear speaker is Marc Okrand, which is also a language creator. He has a PhD in Linguistics from the University of California, Berkeley, and he's a postdoctoral fellow at Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and has a particular interest in Native American languages from the West Coast, which is a bit far from Klingon, but he'll get there. And he devised the dialogues and coached the actors speaking Klingon in many of the movies of the Star Trek series and TV. So he's also author of various books, including the Klingon Dictionary, which is pretty interesting. So I will leave it to them to present themselves more. I forgot to speak in French, so bienvenue à tous. On est vraiment très très content de vous recevoir au Langfest et donc sans plus tarder, dernière petite note, on va prendre une photo à la fin tout le monde ensemble, donc on va vous demander de monter sur le stage avec nous. At the end we'll take a picture all together with our speakers, with our guests, so we will ask you to all come in the front with us. And do you have anything to add?
Oh, then that's it. That's it. It'll be an epic picture. We'll get our guests there. We're all going to be around. So stick around. Don't leave right after the show. All right?
Thank you for your attention and interest. You all look lovely, and it's going to be a great night. So, Marc and David.
David and Marc.
Now the best part. Oh, there we go. I was going to say my phone isn't going, but it's connected. So, what's up? Yeah, if you're in the very back, can you hear this? How about if you're in the very back, there's seats up here. Anyway, Klingon speakers. How? Uh-oh. Come on, little fella. Oh, there we go. How do you say this? Yes. Anybody? Here, wait. Okay, come on. If you've studied Klingon, you should know how to say this. Okay, come on. Give me on count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Actually, of course, most people who study Klingon probably only know the romanization.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so how do we pronounce this?
Klingon.
No.
What is that? I don't know. I don't read that stuff.
N-U-Q-N.
Oh. This is Nukner.
There we go.
Means what do you want?
All right, so that's our way of saying welcome. I know that many people were probably wanting to hear us speak our languages at least once, so I thought it would be fun if instead of that, we spoke each other's languages.
Which we never have before.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, until this very second.
So, this isn't working great, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, well, there we go. All right, so this is the Dothraki language, and I have it here for Marc. Go ahead and...
I think this is the first time I looked at this once before tonight just to see if I could see it. But other than that, it's all new to me. It says, Dothraki Ladrakia. Hajanazi. Sheshira kasar. How did I butcher that? I recognize the first word.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
And thank you for acknowledging that the Dothraki are the greatest and strongest warriors throughout the entire galaxy. I appreciate your honesty. Thank you. All right. Okay, now, so you know what? This isn't going to work as well, so I'm just going to switch to my little handheld thingy. But now there is Klingon for me, and so since I can't even see it on my phone, I'm just going to stand up and do it like this, and I will do my best shot. I'm not the best at pronouncing Klingon, so I will try. So,
You sound like Discovery.
Oh, that's much better.
That's much better. What you're saying, what you said is because I'm attending Langfest, I'm talking Klingon.
Wait, say it again louder. Wait, what?
Because I'm attending Langfest, I'm talking Klingon. That's what it means.
Nice. All right, so, okay, this should now function. What is the deal? All right, so we're going to give it our best shot. If this thing isn't advancing, then we'll try our best. But just be patient with us. If worst comes to worst, I'll just stand back there the entire time. But to get us started, I thought it would be nice to talk about how we each kind of got into language creation, and also kind of our background in language, because we kind of came from language to language creation. So I thought we'd start with Marc. So tell us when is this
picture is from undergraduate school, which is University of California in Santa Cruz. I have no idea why I'm wearing a tie.
I was wondering that myself.
I'm quite sure that's the only time in the 4 years that I did. But I studied linguistics there. I got introduced to linguistics, never heard of it before then. We had a class at the very, very beginning for all the freshmen, which was called something like Language, Culture, and Society. And if you think about it for a minute, there is nothing that isn't included under that. And I think the faculty figured that out because the course was a big hodgepodge of all sorts of things. So it was an introduction to literature and history and psychology and philosophy and all kinds of things, and linguistics. And of all those things, the most interesting part for me was the linguistics part, because I never heard of studying a language, looking at languages in those ways. So I said, oh, this is cool. So I went on and said, I took the Linguistics 1 or whatever it was called, took Linguistics 2, whatever it was called. Then summer came back. They'd remodeled the entire curriculum while I was gone, so I couldn't take Linguistics 3. It didn't exist. So what they did instead is set me up with a one-on-one study with a professor, which is really unusual for undergraduate, who set me on a little project with some California Indian languages. And that was it. That was the hook. That's what got me going.
Cool. Let's just see. Oh, it's so sad. Yeah, it's open. Yes, we're on the same Wi-Fi. Let's see if we can go now. Let's see if it's going to work better. So here we go. This is in Berkeley, right?
Yeah, the graduate school in Berkeley.
So yeah, you got your BA. You got your BA in linguistics from Santa Cruz. What gave you the drive, I guess, to go to graduate school after that? Had you been planning to go to graduate school
When I started undergraduate, no, because like everybody else, I had no idea what I was going to do. And this was the 60s. But no, because it was so much fun. It was so interesting. Wow. So I went on to Berkeley. And in California at the time, there was a big push to study the local languages, the native languages, which were all kind of fading away. And Berkeley was the center for that.
Yeah. And so this thing works great for a second, then it just dies. Oh well. So there. This is later.
This is later. This is
1982.
This is 1982. This picture was taken the week I got involved in Star Trek.
Yeah, so I guess describe a little bit what happened after graduate school to this point, just briefly.
After graduate school to this point, after graduate school, I taught linguistics for a little while at UC Santa Barbara. There's a lot of UC, University of California stuff. Then I went to the Smithsonian to do some research. Then I got sidetracked altogether and spent a lot of years doing closed captioning, which is just subtitles on TV, mainly for deaf people, but now mainly for people in sports clubs and bars. And while I was there, because of all kinds of fluky circumstances, found myself in Los Angeles having lunch at Paramount Pictures. And that came about just by accident. A friend of mine worked there, but she happened to work for Star Trek. And they were making Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. They were in post-production already, and then they were telling me that they found out that I knew something or other about linguistics, and they said, yeah, we know we're going to hire somebody from the linguistics department at UCLA to work on the film. And I said, that's cool. What are they going to do? Well, there's a scene in the movie where Mr. Spock, you know Mr. Spock, right? And a female Vulcan named Savik have a little conversation. Here's Star Trek II. And when they filmed it, the actors were speaking in English because the script said to speak in English. But now they're doing post-production, they decided for a number of reasons that they shouldn't be speaking English, they should be speaking Vulcan together. One of the reasons for making that change was to show some kind of special connection between the two characters, that they were different from everybody else and kind of apart somehow from everybody else. And they thought that having them speak their own language was a better way to show that, or an additional way to show that beyond pointed ears, I guess. So the idea was to hire this linguist from UCLA to come over and look at the film. It's only about 10 seconds. Look at the film, look at their lips, write down what they were saying, and make up gobbledygook nonsense, that matched the lips, and then they would dub it in, they would put subtitles. And I said, that's really smart, because then you don't have to shoot the whole thing all over again, and a linguist knows how to do this sort of thing because they know what kinds of sounds look like other sounds and things like that. And they said, yeah, we thought it was a good idea too, but it's turned out to be a headache. This is 35, 37 years ago. I don't remember what the headache was about, except for that it was a boring headache. She said, I don't know what we're going to do. We have to have this taken care of right away. I said, what do you mean right away? Got to be done by the end of this week, which is exactly how long I was going to be in Los Angeles. I said, I can do that. My friend said, yeah, he can do that. He's got the same kind of degree those people at UCLA do. At that point, the associate producer walked by. They turned to him and said, hey, we just solved the Vulcan problem. He said, what do you mean? She told him about the conversation. He said, come see me after lunch. And the end of the story is here I am.
By the way, so when was that? Was that, because this was when it was shooting, right? So
this was post-production, so it was 82.
It was post-production, right. So that was 82. So I was born in 1981. There I am. and yeah, so that's me. So when I was born, my mother and all of my mother's family is from Mexico. My father, I never met, but wasn't. And so I grew up with English and Spanish. Then my mother met my stepfather, my first stepfather at the time, who didn't want us associating with my mother's family at all and didn't want us speaking Spanish or anything like that. And then eventually we moved to Fresno. And so while I was growing up bilingual for a time, I kind of lost it for a moment. And actually me and there I am. I used to be, my grandmother used to take care of me. There she was. And then on the right, oh yeah, that's my grandmother too, over there. That's her sister-in-law. Oh man, I was hoping this thing would update too, so I could at least look at it. But whatever. Anyway, so what happened was, hello. Oh, I'm sorry. There's my mother. I just wanted to show you pictures of my mother. Look at this. This hair is outstanding. I don't know why people don't do that anymore, because it is just amazing. Anyway, so this is kind of the same situation, I think, for me and my cousins. They're my cousins, and that's my little sister, who just now went to college, starts college at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. on Monday. She just moved in, so exciting. We're 20 years apart. So we were kind of all in the same boat. Each of us had one parent who spoke Spanish and another parent who didn't, that then vanished for one reason or another. And so we kind of all ended up in the same situation where we had a lot of familiarity with Spanish but didn't really speak it so much. And that situation persisted for some time. Sorry, there we go. And so for a while I really wasn't interested in language at all because when I came back and my mother divorced that man and we were reintegrated with our family, I just didn't have any familiarity with Spanish much anymore, and so my relatives would speak Spanish and I wouldn't understand it and I would get very frustrated, and so I decided I just kind of had it with language. I wasn't interested in it at all. I got to high school and I took Spanish because it was going to be the easiest language to take, and I just kind of coasted through it until I was 17 years old, and I suddenly decided for no reason at all that languages were the best thing on the planet, and I wanted to learn every single one if I possibly could. It happened for absolutely no reason that I know of, but when I got to college at UC Berkeley, there I am, so I was a freshman there, I decided to sign up and take as many languages as I could. I took Arabic immediately, and then my English major courses, because that was my major, to see how well I could handle college. And then when I realized I could handle it, I was like, all right, this is fun. So then I took maybe 1 or 2 English courses the next semester, and then I took another semester of Arabic and a semester of Russian and a semester of Esperanto at the same time. It was amazing because there was a class in Esperanto there that was taught by 2 native speakers. It was a student-taught class. It was a rare thing to be taught by a native speaker, I would think. And they happened to be freshmen there at the same time that I was. And there happened to be a program at Berkeley to allow students to teach classes, and so I took it. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of anybody creating a language. Next, I took a linguistics course, and that was what kind of gave me the idea to create my own language. This is actually my dorm room where I created my first language. And you have to excuse this picture here because I had a canker sore at the time. It was very difficult to smile, very painful. That was my girlfriend at the time. There's more. I lived in a place called Casa, Zimbabwe. It was pretty wild. It was a cool place. Anyway, so when I created my very first language, I kind of like combined the ideas of like the various languages I'd studied and linguistics and Esperanto into a language and produced my first language, which I kind of summarize like this. So that girlfriend, by the way, her name was Megan, and you see the name of, and my name is David. Yeah, it's super cringeworthy. And I'm gonna show you what this language is all about here in just 1 second here. All right, so before you get it, you need to know a little something about Arabic. So in Arabic, for those who haven't studied it, Arabic has kind of the system where there's these triconsonantal roots that do a bunch of cool stuff. And remember that Arabic goes from right to left. So sorry, where am I on? The K is, did I just cut out? Can't. It's like it turned off on me or something. Did it run out of batteries? Wait. Try it again. Am I coming through? Is it just me shouting? Because I can shout. Oh. All right, there we go. All right, so the K is on the right, or over there, and then the B is on the left. So in Arabic, you have words like this. So, katib is a word for writer, maktab is office, kitab is book. It's very echoey. I'm going to move it away now. Okay, so kitab is, oh gosh darn it. This thing is absolutely going to be the death of me. I'm going to, how's this? Is this good? All right, fine. All right, anyway, katib, maktab, kitab, and so on. All right, I'm going to try cool it with my bilabials. And so you can see that K, T, and B always come in the same order, and then there are vowels kind of around them. This also works with the verbs. So you have naktub is we write, aktub is I write, katabat is she wrote. All right. So I thought, well, I can do that with my language too, and so I did. So here's like 3 consonants. You put them in a row. There's flamethrower, flame colored. It has its own like special root just for colors right there. And then flame, Jasif. Gosh, this thing has a sweet spot. And so let's say that you had. I'm sorry, we have this for verbs as well. Oh, this is killing me. Do you have a handheld?
Mine's working well, huh? You've heard every word I've said for the past 10 minutes.
All right, we ready? Okay, I'm going to jump up here for 1 second, just so that, because this screen isn't working. All right, so let's say that you had a root like this, LZN, all right? So then this is what you could do with this crazy language. All right, so LZN, here's the basic word. It means ostrich, right? Lezen. And so then you could turn it into this one, and lizenet is the act of being an ostrich. Lazen is an ostrich tool or an implement with which ostriches. Lizen is an ostrich habitat. That makes sense. Lazon, something that got hit by an ostrich. And then, of course, ilzena is the study of ostriches. Lazine, imbued of the true essence of the ostrich. Whereas luzun is ostrich-like. And lazinet is ostrichine, luzan is ostrich, these are adjectives. Lazen is like an ostrich habitat, a word that was very important. Lizna is ostrich-colored. I actually kind of like that. And then, of course, if you want to tell somebody, be an ostrich, that's lazana, and become an ostrich, lazullana, right? Ostrich juice. I'm a big fan of juice, so I felt like it should have its own pattern for juices. And then this is if there was a number. So this is 1 ostrich, right? Lazun, I guess. Lazain is ostrich tea. I don't even know. I can't. Oh, ostrich tea. Because if lazun is ostrich, the number, then ostrich tea, it's the ostrich tea one. Like it's the 40. So it's like, 40, 50, 60, ostrich tea, that's it. Okay. And then there's ostrich 100, ostrich 1,000, ostrich million, ostrich billion, trillion, quadrillion. There's 1 over ostrich, that's right? So this is how you would say ostrich 100, ostrich. And then this happened with time as well. So ostrich second, ostrich minute, ostrich hour, ostrich day, ostrich month, ostrich season, ostrich year, ostrich decade, century, millennium. So there you go. So that was my very first language that I ever created, and I thought it was the best language ever. And I thought that no language could possibly be better. Until I met people that actually created languages, and they did things very, very differently. And so, of course, the first thing I thought was like, well, I'm obviously better than them. But then, after a little bit, I was like, oh no, wait, it's the opposite. They're way better than me. And so once I kind of swallowed that bit of humble pie, I was able to kind of move on and start my own personal journey as a language creator. This is around 2001. And so then I spent that time over the next 8 years kind of studying the craft of language creation from other language creators, and I got better. This was also at the time that I learned that there was a Klingon language. Despite the fact that I watched Star Trek The Next Generation growing up. I watched the first episode in 1987 and watched it thereafter. I watched several of the, no, actually by that time, I think I'd watched all of the Star Trek movies up to that point. I had seen them, still had no idea that there was a Klingon language until I was introduced to it. And so this was kind of like, that was like my uncovering, my unfolding, my journey into language creation. So anyway, now let us, so now let's move on to how we kind of got into working as language creators. So Marc has already told you the story about how he got into Wrath of Khan. So now you can see what he did. So let's see. Were we supposed to put the clip first?
Doesn't matter.
All right, cool. Go, take it from here.
Whoa.
What the heck? How are you doing that? Oh my goodness, everything's going haywire here. I got this. Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
What that was the original dialogue from those 10 seconds in Star Trek II. Okay, that's what the 2 lines apiece that Spock and Saavik said. And those are the ones that the lips match in the gobbledygook that I made up. I don't know what that is.
I think I'm just going to have to stand back here. I really apologize.
There it is.
Yep. So here you go.
Okay, that's the original dialogue. That's not what the subtitles say. Okay, because one of the reasons they wanted to do this whole thing is because one of the subtitles, actually the first one, the tense is wrong given where the scene comes in the movie. Okay, because he's not what I expected, referring to Captain Kirk, or Admiral Kirk, whatever he was. He's not what I expected, sir, implies that she's never met him before. But if you saw the movie, you know that she had, and they realized that at some point, said, oops. So rather than shoot the scene all over again, they said, we'll make this gobbledygook and change the subtitle. So the first subtitle is, he's never what I expect. Okay, which makes more sense for where it falls in the movie. So the subtitles do not match the lips. This is what matches the lips, okay.
All right, so here, I'll show you the next one. These are all the changes.
These are the subtitles, right.
Yeah. All right, so now ready to roll the clip?
Yeah.
Jishun wala, ich banu.
Tuachriach wikban otlam.
Ich vengi, komi.
Winga chlami bafech savekam.
That's the whole scene.
There you go.
What's interesting about that, among other things was interesting about that, is when I was watching it, I wasn't just watching their lips and listening to what they said. Well, I shouldn't say that. I wasn't just listening to what they said and writing it down. I was also watching the lips to see if they did anything that you couldn't hear. And Nimoy, Spock, did. Okay, I don't know if you noticed. At the end of each sentence, he closed his mouth, which sounds kind of silly. But he goes, blah, 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 blah. So both of his sentences end in which I guess is some kind of grammatical suffix in Vulcan. I don't know. So, took advantage of that.
All right. So, and that was it for Star Trek II, right?
That was it for Star Trek. So I did that.
Yeah.
And then I left. I drove away from the sound stage where we did it, realizing that I just had taught Mr. Spock how to speak Vulcan, which was very weird. And honestly and truly thought that was the end of it. That was fun. That was cool. As a linguist thing to do, that was great. Working in a movie was fun. Working in Star Trek was better. All right, get on with life. Until the phone rang about a year and a half later. What comes next?
Yeah,
because I can't see the little phone.
Here, go ahead. Because what we have next is basically we're introducing Klingon. So go ahead and just set this up first before getting into how you built it. What happened with the phone call? What happened next, sir?
Oh, I got a phone call. And it was Harv Bennett, who was the producer for Star Trek III now. And he said, we're making a new movie. The villains are going to be the Klingons. I think they ought to speak their own language. I checked around. Doesn't seem anyone in charge of that. You did Vulcan. You want to do Klingon? Every once in a while in life, you're presented with a decision that's really easy to make. Okay. That was one of them. So I said yes, and that's when conlanging began for me. Because what I did for Vulcan is not conlanging. That's lip syncing. That's just matching stuff up. But conlanging began with this. The very first time Klingon is ever mentioned in Star Trek is in the original series back in the '60s. It's an episode called Trouble with Tribbles. If anyone knows anything about the original Star Trek, that's the one you know. And there's a scene in there where the Enterprise crew and a bunch of Klingons are together in some kind of outpost bar, and one of the Klingons insults the Enterprise, and Scotty gets upset, and a barroom brawl begins. But what he says in insulting the Enterprise is something along the lines of, the Enterprise is built like a garbage scow. Half the galaxy knows that, and that's why they're learning to speak Klingonese. That's not a direct quote, but something like that. But then he doesn't speak it, okay? He only speaks English, and all the rest of the Klingons forever and ever speak English, until Star Trek the Motion Picture. Star Trek the Motion Picture, the opening scene, which you probably don't have.
We don't have it, okay. No.
The opening scene is the Klingons. There's 3 Klingon ships, and one by one they get zapped by something, and then they're gone. But before they're gone, we see inside the lead ship, and here's Klingons, as we've never seen them before, then in 1979, with bumpy foreheads and all this, and the main guy is speaking Klingon with subtitles and everything, right? And that's where the language began. There's only 6, 7, 8 lines,
Yeah, there you go. So if you
Yeah.
want to, I don't know, only one of them has English.
Yeah.
Do you know what the others were supposed to
No.
mean?
There's 6, 7, or 8 lines. Some of them have subtitles, a couple of them don't, and that was the start. Those lines were made up by a couple of people. One was John Polville, who was one of the producers, and the other one was James Doohan, the actor who played Scotty. They made it up. What they had in mind was just make something weird and strange and noisy and stuff like that. I don't think they had any grammar or vocabulary much in mind. A little bit they did, because one of the lines is there twice with the same subtitle, so someone thought of that. The actor who speaks the lines is a guy named Marc Leonard, who normally played Spock's father, but in this movie he plays a Klingon. And when I met him the first time and told him what I was doing, he pulled out of his pocket a sheet of paper. He said, "Yeah, I spoke Klingon, and here's what I said." And there was the lines from the movie and a whole bunch of other stuff. And this is not Marc's writing or anything. This is a rendition of what it was. All this other stuff is not in the movie, which is a good thing. Because if it was, Klingon would be really, really different, from what it turned out to be. Because I based what I did on the stuff that is in the movie. When I say it's not in the movie, that's not entirely true. There's a little view screen that you see, and there's a Klingon jabbering away, but you can't hear him, okay, because other people are talking in front. But this is the beginning of Klingon. So the first one says, "Hui-cha," no longer means, "Did you see what I saw?" I guess they thought at some point that's what it was going to be. It means tactical or evasive or something or other.
All right. So then you started working on Star Trek III proper. Before we actually show some of these clips, when you were sitting down to create the language, all right, you had that material initially, but what was your next idea as you started to build out a full language?
So I had to think of, well, when you make up a language for movies, as opposed to make up a language on your own about ostriches, it's not the same procedure. Because what the lines had to mean and what the words that I would create had to be were not in my control. I got a script, so I had to make up stuff that meant that. And I didn't, from their point of view, have to make up any more than that. It's just enough to cover that. So that's exactly what I did, because I didn't know this is going to go on and on. So I made up everything that was needed for the movie. I based the sounds on the Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Those sounds and those syllables got incorporated into what I did. Then I added some stuff. In adding stuff, I tried to pick sounds. There was 2 things in mind. One is to pick sounds that were not English at all, sounds. But I couldn't make sounds that were too far out, because these actors had to say them and had to learn the lines relatively quickly. So anyway, so that's where the sounds basically came from. And actually, I would say 75% of the sounds of Klingon are perfectly good North American English sounds, and just the rest are things pulled in from other languages. What I tell a non-linguistically sophisticated audience, which is not this, is that there is no sound in Klingon that you can't find in some human language somewhere or other. But the collection is unique. All of those particular sounds should not be in the same language, and that's partly what gives Klingon a strange sound, and also what makes it really hard to pronounce if you pronounce it correctly. That's an important little parenthetical thing there. So that's where that came from. The grammar, I don't know where that came from, except for that I was thinking, all right, it's not a human language, so I have to do non-human language things with it. Well, what does that mean? Well, languages tend to do certain things in common. It's really shaky ground to say all languages do this or something like that. But you can't say languages tend to do this. So, certain sounds tend to go together in the same language. Certain sounds tend not to be together in the same language. It's the same thing with grammar. Some things are more common, some things are less. And for this, sort of the basic order of elements in a sentence, subject, object, and verb, there's mathematically 6 possibilities of which order they come in: object, verb, subject, object, verb. There's 6. And if you look at all the languages in the world, you'll find representatives of all 6, but of their basic order. I mean, you can do all kinds of rearranging within a language. But of all those 6, some of them are a whole lot more common than others. So subject, then verb, then object, which is English, is really, really common around the world. The least common is where the object comes first. So I picked that for Klingon. So Klingon, the word order happens to be backwards from English, but not because it's backwards from English, but because it's the least common in the human language, and therefore, from some weird point of view, the least human, which is not to insult the people who actually speak languages that, that do that. There's not very many of them. So things like that. I also intentionally left out the verb to be. That was a choice to make it non-English. Like I keep saying English, knowing that this film has international distribution, but it's filmed in English, and the basic first audience is English speaking.
Right. All right. So let's. I can't remember what this clip is at this point. Oh, it was going so well. You were doing such a great job, buddy. Okay. So
let me pause for just before you said. So what the procedure was is I made up the lines. I made up a transcription to do it, which is not that funny writing that I couldn't read at the beginning, but it's Roman letters with capital letters coming and going in some weird way. But there's a reason for that. Made cassette tapes of me saying it. Does anyone here remember what a cassette tape is? Made cassette tapes, sent them to Hollywood, and they gave them to the actors who would put them in their car cassette players and practice their lines spitting at their windows on the Hollywood freeway and things like that. Then went out to Hollywood and worked with the actors when they were saying the lines. But this is Hollywood. And certain things happened, so even though I had this language where all the grammatical rules made sense, that the phonology was gorgeous, there's actors and producers and directors and things. And so stuff like what's about to happen, if this is what I think it's going to be.
All right.
Oh my God.
Captain, what is happening?
We're under attack. Stand by for evasive. Kom op på! Skjorten ner! Wat stop! Kach! Hot the bach.
So what was relevant there was the first two lines. The Krug, who's the commander, who's played by Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future and all that stuff. The first two lines that he says. The first one, the subtitle was Gunner, Target Engine 1, which is Matcha, which means gunner. Dosh means target. The translations are not word for word or anything like that. So the Klingon is Matcha, gunner, Dosh, the target. Chontat nech, only the engine only. Chontat is engine, nech means only. Okay? So the guy says, okay, but he doesn't do that. He blows the ship up. Krug is angry. And what the script says, he says after that, is, well, what the subtitle says is, Kamaput Chontat nech, I wanted prisoners. But notice that Chontat nech is the same. Originally, when he Kamaput Chontat nech means I told you, engine only. Okay? The next line was I wanted prisoners, but they took the I wanted prisoners subtitle and put it with that. So I said, all right, how does this work? Okay, because it's already on film, right? Well, the way that works is I just said, okay, I wanted prisoners. We already know because you've all been paying close attention. The object comes first, so the first word must be the object, so that must be prisoners, right? So kama I decided is prisoner. Pu is a suffix that means plural. I already had a plural suffix, now I have another one. John is a verb that means to capture. Ta is a brand new suffix that means to succeed at doing something or other. And nech means want. That was already floating around. So it's sort of and when you're giving commands in the heat of battle, you can leave little grammatical things out. So it's sort of, I wanted to succeed in capturing prisoners, so it's grammatically just fine. Okay.
So this is actually just this is what you sent, right?
This is what I sent. Yeah, this is what I sent actually to Christopher Lloyd. Christopher Lloyd wanted to know what he was saying. Okay, he wanted to know what all the pieces of the words meant and how the sentences fit together. So this is what I said. So come up with Jontanek. I told you engine only, right? It's perfectly clear.
Yeah.
But that's not what ended up in the film.
And then
I Wanted Prisoners was the right subtitle, but that's the way you say that. Then, okay, because since now the word for prisoner became kama, I said, well, yash must mean something else, so yash now means officer.
All right, so then we had another line that was kind of fun. So we have this line, which is what you translated, right?
Right. There's a scene later in the film where Krug has 3 prisoners down on the planet, on a planet, and he wants something from Captain Kirk. So he's going to say, look, you give me what I want, okay, or I'm going to take drastic action. And to prove how serious I am, I'm going to kill one of the prisoners. So he's got a soldier, whatever, gunner guy down there, and he says to him in Klingon, kill one of them, I don't care which one. Okay? And that's the way you say that. At the time, things have changed a little bit. If you know Klingon, you say, that's not right. But it was then. Ha means one. Yehoch is an imperative, kill. Ye is an imperative prefix. Choch, kill. Okay? Object comes first. One, kill. Vait means somebody, anybody, something like that. Dishachbe means I'm not concerned about, sort of. So kill one of them, I don't care which one. That's what he's supposed to say. All right, now what? All right, you got that? He left out the ha, and he left out the vait. Okay? The director, as soon as we finished shooting the scene, Christopher Lloyd yells, I blew it! The director, who's Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock was my boss, which is weird, said, Marc, how did the Klingon sound to you? The answer to that had to be, it sounded fine, okay? So, all right, now what am I going to do? Because ha, the word for one, isn't there. So Yehoch just means kill, but the whole point is kill one. Well, Hoch means kill. Ye is still an imperative prefix, but you only use it for a singular object. So I had to make up a whole new prefix for a plural object and all that. Yeah, so it's fine. You know. But once again, the movie making kind of interferes with what you want to do.
So the way I came to Game of Thrones was a little bit different. So when I had, like I said, I'd been creating languages for about 10 years, and then pretty much out of the blue, the producers of Game of Thrones contacted the Language Creation Society and hired them to find a language creator through whatever means they wanted. And so the Language Creation Society decided that the best thing to do was going to be to hold a competition and announce it to language creators everywhere, which they did. Of course, a lot of the details of this competition were confidential, and so what they were allowed to announce was that they were holding a competition to create a language for a television show. And that was it. So there were a lot of language creators who didn't take it seriously. Some who were really, really good language creators, others who weren't so good. But there were also a number of language creators who did take it seriously and followed through, some of whom were very, very good. So if you signed the NDA to participate in this competition, you were given a packet of instructions as to what you needed to do for this competition, and these were they. So, to kind of read them for you so you don't have to. So one, you just have to say you're going to sign the contract if you get this thing. Two is that you need to have a description of the language's phonetics. You're going to be creating the Dothraki language for the adaptation for A Song of Ice and Fire. You need to create a romanization so that the actors can read it, presuming that the actor's not going to be able to read IPA. And then you have to translate all of the dialogue that they gave you, which was like half of the pilot. And 5, I want to draw your attention to this one, very important. Any additional grammatical notes or translations you want considered. So I read that and I was like, wow, well, I know what the next month and a half is going to be like. Because they just said that this is a competition where you can show us anything you want, whatever. So, from September 9th, 2009 to September 26th, I created a 143-page grammar document of the Dothraki language I translated about 21 pages of dialogue, and I summarized the whole thing in 17 pages. For 181 total pages, looked like this at the time. This was just the grammar document and dictionary. All right, so, Don't applaud me. Boo the creation of this competition. That's not how you get a job. Anyway, so this was for round one. There you go. This was for round one. This was for round one of the competition. At that time, Dothraki sounded like this.
Dialogue 8. Vijade havijada noreti shafki. Silver for the silver of your hair.
It changed a little bit. The grammar of it now means that you don't use the genitive there. You use the ablative because it's inalienably possessed. In other words, well, hopefully, or if it's not getting cut, if things are going well, your hair is inalienably possessed. If things aren't going well, maybe not, or if you're getting a haircut. Anyway, so that was September 9th to September 26th. And then we sent it off. The first round was judged by other language creators. And on October 1st, we got this email back that said we have the following finalists that are going to move on to the final round. And there were 4 people. There was me. There was John Quijada, who is a language creator who created Ithquil. If you've never read the New Yorker article, Utopian for Beginners, you should. He created a language that attracted some interest on the internet. As it would turn out later, the interest it attracted was from a terrorist group in Russia. Unbeknownst to him, it's an amazing story, and you can read it for free online, so I recommend that. There was Olivier Simon, who created an auxiliary language to compete with Esperanto from France, and Bill Weldon, who did some translation for the Lord of the Rings movies. And then the alternate, I don't know why they chose an alternate, they should have just done 5 finalists, was Sherry Wells Jensen, who actually created the Braille encoding for Klingon. Forget if I told you that. Yeah, she's a linguist from Bowling Green, the Ohio one, and she teaches a language creation course. She's a language creator herself, and she happened to, she's blind, and she created the Braille encoding for Klingon. Anyway, so, and then she went on to create language for a series of middle grade books called Bearhaven. They're really cute. And she also created a language for the wildest, like, animated short from Italy I have ever seen in my entire life. It's not out yet, but you gotta see that one. It's wild. Anyway, so so for the finals then, I realized, oh great, I've got to beef up my stuff even more. And so I did. I added another 60 pages to that grammar document. I did 50 pages of dialogue translation because at this finalist stage, we had to translate all of the dialogue for the pilot, which, again, think about this. In order to apply for this job, you had to do the job. And mind you, at this stage of the game, this was an internal pilot that was only going to be shown to HBO, after which point HBO would decide if this show was even going to go to series. All right? So it was literally do the entire job, and we'll decide who gets paid. Anyway, and then I shortened my summary. I got better at summaries. And then I had 39 pages of ancillary material. So this is what that looked like at that stage. Yeah, it's going all right. There's still a Z word. I don't know why it stops there. Anyway, so I sent that along with a very specific goal in mind. I was, because this last round was going to be judged by the producers, who of course were not language creators. The first round was judged by other language creators. And so I had a very specific goal in mind. I wanted to send them as much material as I could that was, the best that I could possibly do and was as linguistically dense as possible. And then I also included this one page, which is titled Dothraki Fun Facts. And it says a bunch of silly things on it, like, what do we got here? The Dothraki have no word for sin or shame. This is true because I hadn't created them. Yeah. And then, like, I don't know, some other stuff. Grammatically, the wind is considered to be more alive than a human girl. There's a story behind that, but it just sounds like, ooh. And then I said, where is it? Here we go. The Dothraki have 4 different words for carry, 3 different words for push, 3 different words for pull, and at least 8 different words for horse, but no word which means please. And so I stand by that. And by the way, the different words for push and pull and carry and things like that, it has to do with whether you're doing it with one hand, 2 hands, your body, or like some sort of an implement. Like if you're pushing something with a cart or something like that. Lots of languages do things like that. Anyway, so yeah, I said that there wasn't going to be a word for please. I never said that there wasn't a word for thank you. There was. But then they obviously read this because when they announced that they had chosen me some weeks later as the winner of this competition, they rewrote the pilot script and added this line, how do I thank them? And then Jorah says, the Dothraki have no word for thank you, or something like that. And they clearly extrapolated from what I wrote, even though I hadn't intended that. And I was a little embarrassed by that. I was like, there's no way a language is going to have a word for thank you. But then it turns out that, yes, there are many languages that don't have a word for thank you, because, of course, the Eurocentric thing in my head was not having a word for thank you doesn't mean that you can't express gratitude. Not everybody does it with a word. Anyway, so I decided to look back. This was October 30th. I decided to see, well, what did I do to celebrate that day? Because now that we have iPhones, they keep track of the pictures you take on that day. It's like, did I do something? Evidently, oops, sorry, what happened there? I went to a costume party, and I took a picture of my mom and my little sister dressed as bananas. Thought that was pretty cute. Anyway, so we're gonna skip ahead a little bit. There's something about Dothraki here. Basically, I made Daenerys' Dothraki intentionally ungrammatical in season 1 as she was learning the language. That was kind of fun. That's what it should be. Anyway, what I wanted to show you was this. So jumping way ahead later, I created a language called Valyrian for season 3. And I want to show you kind of what the process was like. So this is what would happen. I would get script pages that would look like this, right? And way up at the top there, it says in parentheses, it says Valyrian, and the thing below that is in italics, and so that everything below that in italics was supposed to be in Valyrian. But of course, there were 2 Valyrian languages. The producers didn't know this, but it wasn't as important. It was mainly important to, those of us who followed the book, and for me that was doing it. So this is what I would do. Oh, I took that whole screenshot. I forgot to put it in. Anyway, whatever. I used Final Draft, blah, blah. Anyway, so when you're translating something, right, I wanted to show you I translated one line in particular. This line, a dragon is not a slave. When you're doing something like that, if you're doing translation, right, there's some information that comes with this material just automatically that you know as an English speaker. You know all this even if you don't know the words for it, that the first thing is singular, it's the topic of the sentence, it's indefinite, and then of course that it has a lexical meaning somewhere in there. And then there's stuff that's associated with the verb and everything. So if you're going to translate, the first thing is you grab words that are relevant if they exist in your language. And of course, this being Valyrian, of course there's going to be a word for dragon and slave and is not. Or some way to do that. The next thing is you put them in the right order. So Valyrian is the most common word order, actually, subject, object, verb, and that holds even for equative sentences like this. You still put to be at the end. And so you rearrange it, a dragon, a slave is not. Then you do the requisite kind of grammatical stuff to it to get a sentence. So for grammatical reasons, the verb changes to third person singular present subjunctive. Anyway, to give you some background on what the words are, though, dohairagon is a word that means to serve, and this comes directly from the books where we have these phrases, valar mochulis and valar dohairis. Dohairis means, or valar dohairis means all men must serve. And so the infinitive form, dohairagon, means to serve. You can change that to dohairigon, which means to serve habitually. It's a habitual type of thing. And you can turn that into a participle, dohairire, which means serving habitually, and you can turn that into a noun that gets dohairiros, which is somebody who serves habitually, and this is the word for slave or servant in High Valyrian. But that is not actually the final thing that occurs in the show. That is, that's not what happens in the show, and it doesn't for a specific reason. So in this particular scene, you have Daenerys there on the left, who is this queen from another land who is trying to purchase an army of slaves from this guy on the right named Krasnes. And she's going to trade a dragon for it. When he sees her, he assumes that she doesn't speak his language, and so he speaks to her through a translator. And she doesn't let on that, perhaps she speaks his language. She just continues speaking English. And what happens is that this guy is using the translator and is kind of just insulting her up and down, just saying the worst things about her, right? And so the facts of the matter is this. So she speaks this language, High Valyrian, that's kind of preserved from her family that's now dead. She still speaks that. She's come over to this other place where they speak languages that are descended from that, so she's pretty good with all of those. And he speaks a version that is descended from High Valyrian that kind of has this relationship to, Astapori Valyrian has a relationship to High Valyrian that, say, Old Spanish does to Vulgar Latin. And the reason that it does this is the Valyrian Empire over here, right? So these guys conquered these guys and then implanted their government and their language. They used to speak a language called Giscari. And so what happens is that the language that now exists there, Astapori Valyrian, it's like High Valyrian that has a Giscari substrate. Lots of vocabulary, some grammatical structures, they have mixed with High Valyrian and produced a new language called Astapori Valyrian that Daenerys first finds vaguely familiar because she's familiar with languages of the region and then picks up pretty well. So, Dohairiros was the Valyrian word for slave. Buzdar was the Giscari word for slave. And so, when she says to him, in Valyrian, a dragon is not a slave, she decides to use his word for slave to make it abundantly clear to him that she's understood everything he said the entire time. She's understood all the insults, and it's completely got one over on him. So in order to do that, she had to turn it into an official borrowing into High Valyrian, so she added this E for grammatical purposes. It's still in the nominative. And so what you get is the sentence, and this is what that scene looks like.
Is it done then? They belong to me.
Pindas lysa sertida.
Tida.
This is done.
Velocitioni.
You hold the whip.
Sparos Azia Zantir. Vetrajas para divito magis.
Zaldrizes buzdaris kosdaor.
Itraji valere.
Nige Daenerys gelmasmo hentar geriol entrot. En Valeria wipoanagarixan. Valeria munioengos nuhis isa. Dove gedi? Axios entas, mentios entas. Kiloni pilos lyövale tolviosin etas, inini odrikatas, urnei lyö tolvei prisotas.
Kana
Dracaris.
What idiot trades his entire army? All right. So, anyway, so that was kind of like our entry into at least Hollywood created languages. So now let's talk about what happened afterwards. So, I thought one of the most amazing things that you were able to do, that I'm still jealous of, that you did right after Star Trek III, is this right here, the Klingon dictionary. Please tell us how that happened.
I wrote a book. No, when we were making Star Trek III, I was on the set most of the time when they were speaking Klingon. Most of the scenes where you see them speaking Klingon, I'm just outside the frame. Not all the time, but most of the time. And during the when you make a movie, mostly what you do is nothing. You wait around and wait around. The director's very busy, but everyone else is waiting around and waiting around. And during all the waiting around time, the various members of the crew, the filmmaking crew, not the Enterprise crew, would come up to me and say things, "Oh, you're the language guy." Yeah, and they say something in Klingon. And then I say, "What should I say? Say hello, how are you?" A Klingon would never say that, you know. But anyway, I got the idea, it occurred to me that if these guys are interested, there's a kind of person out there who at that point I hadn't had much contact with, but I heard of them, called Star Trek fans. They might be interested. So I proposed the idea of writing a book explaining how the language worked. And a bunch of bureaucratic stuff happened, and they said, yeah, do that. So I did. The idea was that the book was supposed to come out the same day the movie came out, and they would sell it in the lobby or something like that. The book publication got delayed for ridiculous bureaucratic reasons that have nothing to do with Star Trek or Klingon or anything else. But it's a good thing they did that happened, because after I wrote the book is when the film went into post-production. So that change in the subtitles and stuff like that was not reflected in the original manuscript of the book. Had the book come out when it was supposed to, it would not have matched the film. Oh. And people would say, what is this? Okay. Since it got delayed, I was able to revise it so it did match the film. And in writing the book, I described the grammar. It's called the Klingon Dictionary, but if you've seen it, the beginning of it is a grammatical, I still say a sketch. It's not complete, but it's a sketch of how the language works, how the grammar works. And then a dictionary. And in writing the dictionary part, that was harder than writing the grammar part. Yeah. Because what words am I going to put in the dictionary? I put in all the words that I created for the movie, whether they ended up in the movie or not. And then I went back to the original Star Trek TV episodes, which is all there was at the time, and pulled out all the words that had anything to do with anything Klingon-y from any episode that had Klingons in it, even the words in English. If that's all there was, it would have been a really skinny book. So I decided to flesh it out. And in doing that, I imposed a restriction on myself, which is, I'm not, other than the words from the movies and from the original series, I'm not going to make up any words that have anything to do with Klingon culture or geography. Oh. Which sounds weird when you're making a dictionary, but the reason for that is I'm not a screenwriter, I'm not a story writer, and I was afraid that some scriptwriter would come along and write something that contradicted something that I made up for the dictionary. So I decided, well, let them invent the concept, and then I'll tell you what it's called afterwards. I don't hold to that anymore. I do all kinds of stuff now, but that was the thing at the time. So the book came out, and when the book came out, when you write a book, you kind of hope people will buy it, because hey, and that happened. And what I honestly and truly thought would happen is people will buy the book, they'll open it up, oh look, there's real grammar, wow, oh look, here's words, oh yeah, here's the Klingon word for shoe, ha ha, put it down. And occasionally pull it up and look up another couple of words. I was wrong. People did buy it, I was right about that. And they read it very carefully, and they compiled a list of the typos, and so on. and a language-speaking community developed that I hadn't anticipated, which is Klingon speakers. They formed an organization. I'm going totally out of order for your slides here.
That's fine.
Formed an organization called the Klingon Language Institute, which is now 26 years old. And they used to publish a journal called qu'est, which is Klingon for linguistics, with refereed articles about the language. They have an annual meeting. Actually, there's two now annual meetings, one in North America usually, and one in Europe, in Germany mostly. And it's ongoing. And I was surprised when that happened. When I look back, another thing was happening at the same time, because this is, whoops.
I changed to this is the page that you signed.
Yeah, I can't remember who I signed that for or why, or how you found that. But anyway, this little blue book came out in 1984, 1985, December of 84, January of 85, somewhere in there. They reissued it with an addendum because in the meantime Star Trek 5 and 6 happened and the Next Generation happened, so there was more vocabulary and a little bit more grammar. And they published a revised, addended, appended, because they just slapped stuff on the back of it. They didn't integrate it, so there's two dictionaries. If you can't find the word in the front, you have to look for the word in the back, because that was a cheap way to do it. Anyway, that second one is the one that sold pretty well. But at the same time is when the internet was getting going. And that's not irrelevant to all this stuff, because people were able to find each other in a way they couldn't do beforehand. So when the initial book came out, and then before that, people were interested and thought, I'm the only one in the whole world who cares. But once the internet is out there, you found out that's not true, and that's how all this stuff got going. So it's a combination. It's not because it has really cool relative clauses or anything like that, It's because of two things. It's because of the internet and because of Star Trek. Hey, it's true.
All right, we're gonna have to move ahead. I thought some of this stuff was really cool to just look at. So this was a huge list of potential syllables.
Yeah, Klingon words are primarily monosyllabic, or two syllables. But for the monosyllabic ones, what I was doing when I was writing the dictionary is I made a big chart of all the possible syllables that could be words. And as I said, this is a word for horse or whatever. There's no word for horse. This is a word for whatever. Cross it out, so I, wouldn't have any duplication. There's a few that I crossed out because they sounded like words in English or some other language that will not appear in Klingon because I wanted the book to be published.
Yeah, I can see one of them where it's like, can't make that a Klingon word. Anyway, incidentally, this is what a lot of language creators do now. It's just we got tools to do it. So it's just like, here's the phonology. You press the button,
something
just spits them all out. Anyway, so and then this was where you were assigning forms to some of the words.
Right, because I made a big list of what the English words ought to be, and if it's typed in there, it's stuff from the movie or something like that, and the rest is just doing,
Yeah, and then just for interest, this is
the book was written by hand.
Yeah.
The word processors were really new at the time, and I didn't have one. I did have access to one, so I could type it up to send a manuscript to the publisher.
And there it is.
And there it is.
There's the typed version, and then how you transmitted it.
Yeah. That big one is an 8-inch floppy. The Klingon dictionary that's a real copy of the real disc with the real Klingon dictionary on it. The little one is there just for size comparison. It's nothing, but.
So and now, of course, the Klingon dictionary has been translated itself into several languages.
Yeah, there's the Czech version. There's the German version, which is see the red thing? It's the revised German version, because the original German version, the translation of the English to German is not very good.
And then there's, this is Italian.
Right.
And then
Brazilian Portuguese, right. Yeah.
Very impressive. All right, so somewhere around, I think it was 2014 or 2013, I was able to put together a book on Dothraki called Living Language Dothraki. The company, sadly, is not with us anymore. But you can still buy the book through Penguin Random House, and then the next year, The Art of Language Invention, which is kind of like a guidebook for how to create languages. So we're gonna have to kind of like skip through these, otherwise nobody's gonna be able to ask questions. So I'm just gonna kind of show some things to you. This is an article that was written that mentioned Marc after, this was Star Trek II,
Star
right?
Trek
Star Trek II. I just wanted to pull out this quote from the article. Some Hollywood movies today have technical credits 6 or 8 times as large as their cast list. This was this guy complaining in 1982 about the length of credits in movies. I wonder where he is today.
Yeah, what the article was strange credits movies, people getting credits for oddball things, and example number 1 was Vulcan. Yeah.
Yeah. Back when I started doing Dothraki, I was interviewed by the ASD Express over in Estonia because when we were allowed to put out a press release by HBO for Dothraki, I had mentioned that Dothraki had been influenced by several languages, including Estonian. These things were marginally true. We just said them because we figured people would want to, we would latch onto them. And they did, and so I was interviewed in an Estonian newspaper. I was so excited. And then I finally got to go to Estonia later. I mean, this guy just got back from Estonia. You go to Estonia all the time.
I go to Estonia all the time.
Man, very jealous. All right, so jumping ahead just for a few things. In Star Trek V, this is one of the few publicity shots of Marc.
That's school. That's what school was like for the Klingons, yeah.
So in this one, what do you think? Do we have time?
I don't have time. You can ask questions later now.
All right. So this is
a great goof that was resolved by creating a lot more Klingon grammar.
Yeah. To give you the kind of example. So in the beginning, those 2 lines were very, very different, and then Marc had to do some work to.
The actor had a long speech, and he said one sentence twice. Okay, once was correct, and once was pronounced very well, but he shouldn't have said it then. So I had to make up a good reason for the homophony.
Yeah, it's something we've all.
The actor knew it. The actor knew he made the mistake and apologized right afterwards. But of course, this was the take they liked.
The actors always know. Yeah. The editors never know, and they never care. All right. So. Another big, entirely different franchise that Marc got to work on was, of course, Disney's Atlantis, which...
You know that movie?
Oh, yeah.
The hero's a linguist, yeah.
So, and of course, by the way, if you know the story, I don't know if you know this, but indeed, the main character, Milo, his appearance was based on Marc.
No, that's not true.
It is true. I read it on the internet.
Yeah, well...
Is it true?
It's not true.
Well, what were they doing?
It's out there on the internet all the time, but because I saw pictures of Milo before they ever met me, so.
Did he look like that?
Yeah. Oh. But I did meet the animator of Milo, because this is Disney's last cartoon done the old-fashioned way, so there was a different animator for each main character, so Milo had a particular guy who drew him, and I spent about 45 minutes talking to this guy. And before I went in to talk to him, they said, don't be surprised if he's drawing, if he's sketching the whole time, because he'll probably want to see how a linguist moves. I said, what? So maybe Milo moves like me. But,
see?
I don't know.
It's true. He didn't even have glasses before this. No, I'm kidding. All right. Okay, so and then one kind of neat thing was that there was an alphabet that was created.
Yeah, there wasn't supposed to be an alphabet.
There wasn't, no. But... And then there's another shot of it.
Right. That doesn't look like me.
And then this is a shot of it being used in the movie. But of course, the most exciting thing that came out of the movie was...
Atlantis cereal. Now, the way these things, those little flakes, little things, when you put milk in the cereal, the letters would show up on the little chocolate things. It didn't work as well as it does in this picture.
Okay, so very briefly, of course, what we opened with was a version of the Klingon script called, is it Picard?
Picard.
Is it a capital Q?
There's a little Q.
Little Q, oh, so Picard.
Picard.
Okay, cool. So this was a sketch by Marc Jeffries.
Matt Jeffries, yeah.
Matt
Jeffries.
Thank you.
Who's the guy who designed the Enterprise, okay?
Yeah.
And that was the wing on a design of a Klingon ship, and that was the origin of the Klingon writing.
Oh yeah, I was jumping ahead to here's what the writing system looks like, and then they have a new, slightly angular version
for Discovery.
Is this it?
This is Discovery.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yeah, the Klingon writing that you've seen in all, there was no Klingon writing in the original series. The Klingon writing that you see in all the movies and all the TV shows prior to Discovery is gobbledygook. Okay, there's 10, 12 characters that they use and just jumbled them up in various ways to make it look like the things were saying different things. So 2 control panels supposed to be doing different things, the letters were jumbled up differently. I've talked to the visual guy, and we discussed, how this thing should match up with the spoken language, and we don't agree. We don't disagree, we just never came up with anything. No one knows whether you read it left to right or right to left. The artist guy thought maybe you read it from the middle outwards, which I thought was kind of...
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, somebody, somewhere along the line, took those 10 or 12 characters, modified them slightly, added a few more, so there's now 26. There's 26 phonemes in Klingon. That's a total accident, really.
Yeah.
There's 26, and now there's 26 Klingon characters, not counting the numbers, that correspond to my phonology. Even so, none of that was ever used in any of the movies or TV shows until Discovery. Discovery does it right, so everything written in Discovery is real written Klingon. This system has been used on Star Trek official sanctioned products, Star Trek Monopoly or whatever. That's all correct, but it's never been in TV or movies till this.
All right, so this is the coolest thing that we're going to have to skip. There's a VHS video game, VHS and also CD-ROM, right?
Yeah.
Video game. It's called Star Trek Klingon that Marc did a bunch of work for, including, we're just skipping through, including a song that was originally written in English that they asked him to, have Ryman's canon Klingon.
Even though they couldn't play me the song because we didn't have the technology to get me the song and they needed it right away. So they wrote it out like this, and I came up with that, following their same metrical structure. And it worked, but I didn't know that till the final thing came out.
All right, now this is funny though, and it's very typical of Star Trek's Next Generation, so we're gonna do this. All right, so yeah, go ahead and set
this is from Star Trek Next as Worf, okay, and a kid, and this is the end of the episode. And what happened in the episode is the kid's mother was killed, and at the end, Worf is performing a ceremony, because Worf is also an orphan, and they're lighting candles, because Klingons do that apparently. And Worf says something in Klingon, and the kid says, what did you say? And Worf says something like, he doesn't give a literal translation, but he says something along the lines of, I'm paying homage to our mothers, I'm honoring our mothers, something like that. And the kid repeats the line perfectly, even though he's never heard it before, okay? And the line appears without a subtitle, okay? But what he says is, shosh jich bat shoch, okay? Those words literally mean what it says right underneath, in that order. Mother, I, honor you. But remember Klingon grammar. The object comes first. So what he's really saying is, I am a mother, and you are honor. There's the Klingon heard in the TV shows ranges in quality from really good to they just make stuff up on their own, depending on the writer and the producer. And so, yeah.
Yep.
So the Klingon speakers say, the Klingon way to say Klingon language is Klingon Hol. Hol means language. Klingon Hol. So there's Klingon Hol, and there's also something called Paramount Hol.
So I want to show some other examples. Just this was actually an early image of the website for the Klingon Language Institute. It looks fancier now. It doesn't look 90s anymore. And this was a really cool setup where there is this joke about this guy saying to be or not to be, and then the line.
What it is, this is from Star Trek VI. In Star Trek VI, the Klingons and the Federation are getting together for a big dinner, and the leader of the Klingon Empire says, I'd like to propose a toast to the undiscovered country. And everyone sits there with kind of a blank stare. And Mr. Spock says, Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. I might have the numbers wrong. Because this is the phrase, the undiscovered country, is part of the to be or not to be speech. And right after he says that, the Chancellor of the Klingon Empire says, you can't really appreciate Shakespeare until you've read him in the original Klingon. At which point, this guy on the right, who's Christopher Plummer, says, to be or not to be in Klingon. Remember what I said about to be? The phrase to be or not to be was not in the original script, or at least it was not meant to be in Klingon in the original script. And I arrived on the set one day, and the first person I bumped into was the director, and he says, I need another line from you in Klingon. Okay, what do you need? He says, to be or not to be? And I said, okay. And I thought, oh no. Because I was not going to change that for two reasons. One is because I'm not going to change that. And the other one is because in the book it says there's no verb to be. Yeah. So I thought, what can I say instead? I said, what if it means to live or not to live? He said, that's fine. Yeah. Go tell Christopher Plummer. So I went over to Christopher Plummer. Well, first I had to make up the line. And I could have done it grammatically all kinds of different ways, but I kind of did it down and dirty. Had to look in my printed dictionary, which was out at that time. Right, doing the language for Star Trek V was after the dictionary came out, and that was much harder than doing the stuff for Star Trek III without the dictionary because I couldn't make stuff up anymore. I mean, I could make up stuff that was not in the dictionary at all, but if it was in the dictionary, I had to use it. So I looked in the dictionary. Yep, there's a word for live, which was yin. Okay, there's a word for or, which is par, and there's a suffix for not. So yin par, yin be, live or live not. Go tell Chris. Christopher Plummer says, okay, I understand you have a new phrase. What is it? Yin par, yin be. He goes, yin? I go, yeah, he says, that's too wimpy. Think of something else. That's not what he said, but that's what he meant. He says, oh, all right, what about tach? Tach par, tach be. He goes, tach. Tach is good. Let's use tach. Up until that moment, tach was a suffix. It was a continuative suffix to continue doing whatever.
But that can make sense.
Okay, eat plus tach is keep on eating, continue eating. Mm-hmm. I kind of promoted it to be a verb in its own right. So it means to go on, to continue, to endure. So to go on or not to go on, to continue or not to continue, something like that.
Amazing.
So once again, the grammar changed. But this time it was because of a famous Shakespearean actor, so that's all right.
So that line gave kind of the Klingon Language Institute an idea.
Yeah, if Klingon, if Shakespeare was originally in Klingon, the Klingon Language Institute guys figured we owe it to the galaxy, I guess, not to translate, but to restore all the works of Shakespeare back to the original Klingon. And they started with Hamlet, right? There. Which is cheating because they already had to be or not to be. Come on, you know. I didn't do this, you know, other than that one phrase. Other people did this. It's a brilliant translation. Very interesting because they changed it culturally to be Klingon culture as opposed to English, Danish, whatever Hamlet is. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have translations.
And we have translations. This is the Czech version of the Klingon Hamlet. This is the German version of the Klingon Hamlet. And I'd like to point out that the fact that there's a Czech version, which is Czech and Klingon, and a German version, which is German and Klingon, proves without a doubt that Shakespeare was originally written in Klingon.
Okay, I really think that it's too bad we're going to have to skip over this. Yeah, all right, but you can use Bing to translate to Klingon, but don't. Cool thing about Star Trek Discovery is that at least for the first episode of the
entire first season,
you can get all of the subtitles.
The entire show is subtitled in Klingon. Yeah.
All right, and then just to kind of quickly gloss over, after Game of Thrones, I worked on the following other things. So Defiance on Sci-Fi, I created 4 languages for that and 4 writing systems as well. I worked on Thor: The Dark World, the second one, the one that nobody liked. Star-Crossed, which was a show on the CW, Dominion, where I created this language. The 100, that one's still going. It's airing its last season next year. Penny Dreadful, which is my favorite show to watch that I've ever worked on. Not my favorite to work on. The Shannara Chronicles, which ran for a couple seasons. The Warcraft movie. Doctor Strange, a show called Emerald City on NBC. Bright on Netflix, that was a fun one. I got to be on set every single day for that one. And I got to create 2 writing systems as well. Into the Badlands, just for season 3. Kids movie called The Christmas Chronicles. A video game called Arena of Valor. It's a MOBA. And then Another Life, this one came out on Netflix just now. I didn't even create languages for this. I just created writing systems. Pretty wild. And then a couple of things I have coming up. I have a bunch of things, but this is just The Witcher on Netflix. That's coming, and Dune. Anyway, by the way, Marc and I finally met when there was an event at UC San Diego that had me and Marc and Paul Frommer. And so I thought I'd get a picture of all three of us, but there isn't one. So that's them. But if you say, who was taking the picture? That was me. I took the picture.
Paul Frommer is the guy who created Navi for Avatar.
Thank you. Paul Frommer created Navi, the big Avatar. And it's coming back. It's coming back. And then we all worked together on a documentary about language creation called Conlanging, the Art of Crafting Tongues. We could talk for years about this, but this is a documentary. It has us in it. And you'll hear some things that you heard today. But then it has a lot of stories from language creators who never created anything for Hollywood, who just worked on their own, and we're really, really proud of it. So if you want, it's available streaming pretty much anywhere. You can buy it on like the iTunes store and on Amazon. And this is just my little boy Roman. I thought he was cute. I just wanted you all to see him. He's kneading. Anyway, so since we opened with a word of Klingon, I thought it would be fitting to finish with a word of Dothraki. So there it is, the Dothraki word for thank you.
So thank you.
Okay,
so we're set up for questions, right?
Yeah, so I know that we took a little bit longer to get started, and then we took a little bit longer than we thought. As many questions as you can jam in, just throw them out. Questions about whatever, and is there a microphone, or should we just shout? There's microphones, so go. The people who have hands raised.
Yeah. Hi, guys.
Whoa.
Oh, wow, that's a little intimidating. Wow, what a cool talk. Thank you very much for both being here and sharing your experience and journey. So I'm really curious, Esperanto being created, I believe, in the 1800s.
1887.
1887. Yeah. It actually has native speakers now. Mm-hmm. And so do you guys think that one of your languages one day might actually have a native speaker? And if so, would you be intimidated by their native accent?
I'll tell you from my languages, I seriously doubt it. There just has not been the fan reaction to any of my languages that there has been for Klingon. And part of it is the timing, part of it is the franchises that it's attached to and the age group it's aimed at. But, there's plenty of fans of it. Honestly, I doubt that would ever happen. The only language of mine that has a really huge fan base is a language from the 100, Trigeta slang, which is a really huge speaker community. It's kind of wild. But even there, I don't see them raising their kids with it. Plus, it's just future English. So, you could just incorporate it into English and it works. Anyway, Klingon, there's a chance.
There's one famous story. Okay. There was now it's 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
There was a guy who was a graduate student in linguistics at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He and his wife had a baby. He was a Klingon speaker. She was not. He said, I'd like to try something. I want to see if Klingon can be acquired as a natural language, because everybody who speaks Klingon, regardless of how well, speaks it as a second language, right? Either they taught it to themselves or someone taught it to them or whatever. But he was a linguistics graduate student, so they gave him some kind of clout with his wife, I guess, for purposes of this. And she said, okay. So she talked to the kid in only English. He talked to the kids sometimes in English and sometimes in Klingon. There was special son-father time that was entirely in Klingon. And the kids started picking up Klingon. First, he responded as opposed to, he could respond before he could talk. So the father would say in Klingon, where is your nose? And the kid would do this. And where's your eye? And the kid would do that. And stuff like that. Then he started saying some words and so forth. The first word that he said, as far as from what I understand, is "cho," which means I won't, I refuse. The father, they would sing songs together and stuff like this. The father said he started to realize it was really working one day, because when I made up all the vocabulary for Klingon, it never occurred to me to make up a word for baby bottle. It's just, I don't know why, but I did make up a word for drinking vessel of any kind. So a coffee mug, a wine glass, a regular tumbler, that's all one word. Khibjet, that's one word. And that word was used in this house from time to time, but never specifically referring to the baby bottle. One day, the father said to the son in Klingon, go get your khibjet, go get your drinking vessel. The important word here is your. And the kid went and got the baby bottle. Okay? It would have never been used for that before. The father said, this is starting to work. About that time, the kid was, shortly after that, the kid was starting to lose interest because he discovered that nobody spoke this language other than his father. And his father spoke English, so it wasn't necessary. So the whole thing kind of pooped out, but it proved what the father wanted to prove, which is it can be acquired. My favorite thing about it, though, is for a while, the kid was living in a bilingual situation, right? In a bilingual situation, you don't switch from one language to the other just because. There's something that triggers it. Vocabulary, who else is in the room, what you're talking about, you can't remember the words, whatever. There's all kinds of reasons. The kid was at whatever age he was when he was learning how to count. And he wanted to count everything he encountered. No pun intended. So the house they were living in at the time had stairs. So one day he's walking up the stairs and he goes, wa, cha, this is Klingon, wa, cha, wedge, looked around, no one is in the room except his mother. 4, 5, 6. So it worked, yeah.
That's really cool. Who has the next one? Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about, so David, I know that you've done some languages that are related to pre-existing languages, such as
yes.
Bulgarian or the language you did for the 100.
Yeah.
How does your method differ from creating a language just straight from scratch?
Yeah, so the distinction, the vocabulary we use for that in the conlang community is called a priori versus a posteriori. So an a priori language is something like, technically speaking, Dothraki is not an a priori language because there was material in the books, but really, like when you're thinking about it, it's like there's a full and complete language that you're starting from, and you're evolving something new from it. So it's not really super different. The only difference is that you don't have to create the initial state, because when I'm working with an a priori language, I do the same thing. I create an initial state and then evolve up from that to get the language that I want. And the reason that I do that is because you can produce something that looks more naturalistic, more like the natural languages that we speak, with less work, I guess. Or it's more work, but it's a different kind of work. It looks better and it's more authentic, and you don't have to just make stuff up on the fly. A lot of the reasons that we have irregularities in our language is because they just naturally evolve that way, either because the grammar changes or because the sounds change, or a combination of both. And so if you simulate that evolution, the change of sounds, the change of the semantics, and how the grammar shifts, you get those irregularities for free. If you don't do that, then you just have to arbitrarily invent irregularities and say, well, I guess verbs like this are usually irregular, so let's just invent an irregular form. It's not very satisfying, and the result isn't as good. So the process is the same. The only difference is that is that I'm working with a language that already exists. Studying Pidgin and Creole languages was both that and also George Lakoff's work was really, really informative. And then also like historical linguists like Lyle Campbell and Joan Bybee. Their work was really good because you can kind of see how languages kind of recycle stuff. It's like every so often it's like, well, that's too difficult. We're going to create something new out of this expression. And then that expression becomes grammaticalized. It becomes a thing. Pretty soon it's the old way of saying it. And then people say, oh, that's a little clunky. Let's create something new. And then language just keeps going like that. So once you kind of know how to do that, then you just do it. So yeah, process is similar, I would say. Okay. Who has...
Yes, over here.
No, here.
Maybe?
Yes.
Or over there, I don't know. Okay, my question is about the language, the Dothraki language. It's a very powerful language for sure, but how if I understood well, you created the language without knowing that the main character of the series was a female. So it was a woman. So and did you change anything when you knew that it was a woman that was going to talk? And did you modify your language depending on the character or not? And the second part of the question will be, in my opinion, the most powerful word in the Dothraki language is the Dracarys. Is there a story about how you created that word?
Okay, so there are a couple of misapprehensions there, sorry. I can't remember the word for it, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so one, I did know the characters. The books existed before the show, so I knew who the characters were. And second, there are two different languages. There's Dothraki and Valyrian. The language that Dracarys comes from is Valyrian, not Dothraki. And second, I didn't create that word. George R.R. Martin created that word. And in that case, I was a little disappointed with, because the word is Dracarys and it's supposed to mean dragon fire, and it looks like it's directly related to the Latin word for dragon. So I just said, well, maybe they have two different words for fire. One is if a dragon does it, and then another is just regular, ordinary fire. So I created a different word for fire from it. But in general, no, like I mean, when I'm creating a language, I'm not imagining any specific speaker. I'm imagining like hordes of speakers. Then when I go to translate dialogue, that's when I think about the speaker, you know, specifically. How are they going to use this language? How are they going to choose words? How might they use the language differently from the average speaker? Because when I'm just creating the language, it's really just for the huge average, I guess. That makes sense. Okay. I don't know, it should be whoever just has the next mic. So when you're raising your hands, look for the people that are holding the mics. Okay, yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, this whole room is looking at me right now. I have a question. When people hear certain languages, we've got perceptions of what those languages sound like to us. So Germans, Arabic, etc., they sound a certain way. And so there's certain things in certain meanings or characteristics that perhaps some people like to attach to phonetic systems of languages. And with a fictional language, particularly Dothraki and Klingon both being warrior languages, I wondered to what extent you thought about that when you were working on the phonetics of those, whether you wanted them to sound aggressive or macho or anything like that, or whether that doesn't even come into it.
Well, I'll say that a lot of it is just delivery. Any language can sound beautiful or aggressive depending on how you deliver it. Doesn't matter what it is. In the case of Dothraki, the sound of it was influenced like 100% by the material that was in the book. I was just trying to match the phonological aesthetic that George R.R. Martin had created based on my interpretation of how what he wrote should be pronounced. So really, it was just matching that. I think I only added one sound because I felt like, based on what I was seeing, it was a gap, and that was cha. That was it. Otherwise, everything else, not just the sounds, but also the syllables. Everything came directly from the books, and I just matched it as best I could.
Yeah, and with Klingon, there was, as I said, there was a little bit of Klingon before me, and that had the same kind of basic sound that my Klingon has. And there was also instructions from the producers and the writers. One of their instructions was that Klingon is guttural, their word. I'm not quite sure really what that means, but I assume that means and things like that. And the original Star Trek, the motion picture, had so I added that to make it more guttural, you know. But that was there once again. I'm working for them, so I had to do something that they like. And the most of the dialogue in Star Trek 3, Klingon dialogue in Star Trek 3, was commands, barking of orders. So it lent itself to that. Later, there's Klingon conversation. Klingon was already in place, but it sounds a little bit different. And it sounds more flowing, okay? And in fact, there's a book, you can buy a book called How to Speak Klingon, which I didn't have anything to do with. But it's a picture book with Klingons doing everyday things like playing golf and going to the movies. And there's a sound chip in it, okay? And on each page, there's maybe 5 or 6 sentences, and there's this little thing attached to the book, and you push the button corresponding to the page, you hear the first phrase on the page. And I know the guy who recorded that. It's Lawrence Schoen, who's the head of the Klingon Language Institute. And he recorded it in very, very good Klingon, sent it back to the publisher. The publisher said, this is no good, we can't use this. You go, why not? He said, it doesn't sound like Klingon. What do you mean? Because he was not going like this all the time. He was talking naturally. So you have to say it like that. So he did, because it was, he got paid to do it, but you don't have to talk Klingon that way.
Yeah. Yeah, who has the next mic?
Hi. My question is a little bit less about the languages, more about what was your career choice out of college before Hollywood happened? Like, what were you gonna do?
Well, I went to college initially with a very specific plan in mind. I went in as a declared English major with the idea being that I would graduate English and then go get my single subject credential in English and teach high school English. And then I would pursue writing, which is what I wanted to do, and so I would write fiction during the summer and teach during the rest of the year. When I discovered, I was just interested in languages, so you have a bunch of elective credits, so of course I was going to take languages. They had 1 million at Berkeley. When I discovered linguistics, I thought it was so much fun that I thought I would just kind of add it as my fun major. It made English easier, because it's like English, it's just reading books and writing papers, and in linguistics, it was just playing. So it was a delightful breath of fresh air to kind of keep me on track for English. And I was on track to do that and to finish that way, and even found the program that I was going to enter in my second to last semester when I met a girl in our linguistics program, and I thought, oh man, there's an outside chance that maybe this could be the person that I marry and live with for the rest of my life. And she asked me once, well, where are you going to graduate school for linguistics? And I said, well, I don't know, where are you going? And then she was like, well, I'm applying to these schools. And I'm like, well, I want to stay in Southern California to watch my little sister grow up, which was true, so I'm only applying to UC San Diego and UC Santa Barbara. We ended up applying to both of those. I got into both, she got into San Diego, and so that's where we went. But that was the only reason I did that. It was just to really chase her, which worked out well. We're married, we have 1 child. It's been, we've been together 12 years now. Wait, 17 years. We've been together for 17 years, good God. All right, anyway. But yeah, after that, she decided at one point that she was done with graduate school. She just didn't want to be an academic anymore. And I was like, oh, thank God, we can leave. And so, really, I just, I had everything in place to teach English at the community college level. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then that was when the Game of Thrones job came along. So most of the time I was just in school. That was my plan. What was your plan going into college?
I didn't have a plan. This was the 60s.
Right on.
In fact, when I applied, they asked you what major you want to be. And I was afraid to say undeclared because I thought that might show that I'm not serious or something and I wouldn't get in. So I looked for the most general major I could find, which was sociology/anthropology. I said, that sounds like a lot. At the time, they didn't have a linguistics major, actually. There was a linguistics program. There was 1 linguist on campus and a couple other people who could do a couple other things. So my major, as far as the computer is concerned, is independent study or something or other. But then I ended up going to graduate school and pursuing all this stuff and taught linguistics at UC Santa Barbara, right? Mm-hmm. So you could have been there. Would that work, or was that?
I was. They were ready to give me a stipend. They just didn't understand what I cared about.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, I think this is going to be our last one.
Oh, perfect.
Perfect.
So I just wanted to thank you because it was very interesting. My question is not as serious as the last one, but I'm still very curious to know if you know The Office, the TV show, that they actually decided for a character to teach Dothraki to another one without her knowing that it was actually a created language for a TV show. Yeah. And I wanted to know if they contacted you for that and if the pronunciation and the words were accurate.
I found out about that when I sat down with my wife to watch the new episode of The Office that week. That's how I found out. And like suddenly people start texting me like, "Oh, David, you didn't tell us you did this." Like, I didn't do it. I didn't know anything about it. What the hell? I would have wanted to go meet the cast of The Office. That would have been awesome. It was ridiculous. They didn't do it. But I will say this, it was perfect. Everything they did in that show was perfect. How dare they? They don't even get it that right on the show. Come on, man. So I thought that was just wild, and I was so blown away. I still haven't talked to anybody related to that. And so I have no idea about any of it.
Yeah. You know, Klingon pops up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
In venues that I have nothing to do with, nor does anybody else who has anything to do with Klingon have anything to do with.
It's an entire thing in the Big Bang Theory, right?
Yeah, the Big Bang Theory finally has an advisor. Yeah. Although here's my favorite thing about the Big Bang Theory. It has nothing to do with the Klingon language. Well, it does, sort of. My full-time job for a lot of years was not doing Klingon. That was always a side thing. It was closed captioning, right? Subtitles on TV. I was sitting in my office one day, and the Big Bang Theory came on, okay? And the opening shot is the cover of the Klingon dictionary. I'm going, what? And they back up, and the guys are sitting there playing Klingon Boggle, okay? And the Klingon Boggle set has Picard, those funny characters, okay? It wasn't Roman letters.
Wow.
And they're saying real Klingon words, and sometimes good and sometimes not so good pronunciation, but it was all legit. And there's a knock on the door, and it's Penny from across the hall. I'm assuming everyone sort of knows this Big Bang Theory thing. Penny from across the hall, she wants to come in and watch their TV because she didn't pay the cable bill, so she can't watch something or other. They say, no, we're busy, go away. Oh, please, this is an important show, I really want to watch that. And they say, okay, but you have to watch it with closed captions. I'm going, what? This is the Marc Okrand show. How did this happen?
Wow. That's extraordinary. I wonder if they knew.
I have no idea.
So they show the cover, so like you see your name on there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, you sure there's no time for any more?
Well, unless there's some very urgent questions. It is past
this looks
9.
Urgent. Does that look urgent?
Okay.
This looks urgent.
Here, they're coming.
All right, here's our mic.
All right.
Yeah, I've been wondering this for like an hour now. When you said that there's no verb to be in Klingon, how do you make a language without that verb?
Oh, man.
Oh, no, you just leave it out.
Yeah, anybody... Hang on. Raise your hand. How many people speak Russian here? Come on. There you go. Ask them how they get by in the present tense.
How do you get by then? I'm actually very... I don't know anything about languages.
I'd say the word for student in Russian, student. Я студент. Yeah, it's the word for I. Я студент. I am a student.
Which is exactly the way Klingon works.
Yeah, awesome. Exactly
but the other place to be comes up is this is green. You know, the book is green.
Yeah.
So it's just green is a verb, to be green.
Yeah, you do that.
That's cool.
Yeah, same with the...
Got a lot of things to learn. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We have learned a lot about these two languages. All right.